Absolutely not. It's time for us to sit down and have a conversation. That's what the American people expect. That's what I've offered for the last 10 days. Let's sit down and have a conversation. You know, we've had conversations before. Why can't we have one here?
Even some of your own members are saying this is not your strategy. One of your colleagues, Republican Congressman Devin Nunes of California, was asked, what is the House strategy right now? And he said, listen, you really have to call Cruz, Senator Ted Cruz. I'm not even joking about that. He's the one that set up the strategy. Even one of your own colleagues is saying, this is not your strategy, Speaker Boehner. It's the strategy of Senator Ted Cruz and other House conservatives.
I thought the fight would be over the debt ceiling. But you know, working with my members, they decided, well, let's do it now. And the fact is, this fight was going to come one way or the other. We're in the fight. We don't want to shut the government down. We've passed bills to pay the troops. We've passed bills to make sure the federal employees know that they're going to be paid throughout this. We've passed other bills.
Why should federal government employees get paid if they're not coming to work? Wouldn't it be better for them to come to work and have the government?
The last 17 times the government has shut down, federal employees were paid for the time they were off. This is all about fairness. It's not their fault that the leaders in Washington won't sit down and have a conversation. So why should they be punished?
You also told me a couple of years ago that members of Congress shouldn't get paid during government shutdowns, yet they are being paid.
Hey, listen, I've asked my pay to be withheld during this, and so have a lot of my colleagues.
How is this going to end? You're clearly not budging right now, even though polls show that most Americans blame Republicans for the shutdown right now. How long is it going to go on? Is the government going to stay shut down until we reach the debt limit deadline of October 17th?
Listen, the debt limit is right around the corner. President saying, I won't negotiate. I won't have a conversation. Even though President Reagan negotiated with Democrats who controlled the Congress back then, even though President George Herbert Walker Bush had a conversation about raising the debt limit. During the Clinton administration, there were 3 fights over the debt limit. You and I participated in several of those. Mm-hmm. And even President Obama himself in 2011 went through a negotiation. Now he's saying, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to tell you what, George. The nation's credit is at risk because of the administration's refusal to sit down and have a conversation.
They're saying it's at risk because of your refusal to pass a clean debt limit. There have been some reports.
We are not going to pass a clean debt limit increase.
Under no
I
circumstances?
told the president, there's no way we're going to pass when the votes are not in the House to pass a clean debt limit. And the president is risking default by not having a conversation with us.
So under no circumstances will you pass a clean debt limit?
We are not going down that path. It is time to deal with America's problems. How can you raise the debt limit and do nothing about the underlying problem? George, we've spent more than what we brought in for 55 of the last 60 years. This year, the federal government will have more revenue than any year in the history of our country, and yet we're still going to have a nearly $700 billion budget deficit. We are squandering the future for our kids and our grandkids by not dealing with this problem.
The deficit, as you know, has been coming down this year, but I want to press you on this issue of the risks of not passing a clean debt limit. The Treasury Department put out a report just the other day where they said it would be unprecedented and catastrophic. That would be the impact of failing to pass a debt limit. They go on to say credit markets could freeze, the value of the dollar could plummet, U.S. interest rates could skyrocket, the negative spillovers could reverberate around the world, and there might be a financial crisis and recession that could echo the events of 2008 or worse. Do you agree with that assessment?
I do. And the president is putting the nation at risk by his refusal to sit down and have a conversation.
We're going to go back on this, then. He says you're putting it at risk by refusing to pass the clean debt limit. So just let me press that, because there have been some reports that you have told your own members that you would be willing to put a debt limit on the floor that would pass with Democratic votes, even if it didn't get a majority of the Republican conference. Is that no longer true?
My goal here is not to have the United States default on their debt. My goal here is to have a serious conversation about those things that are driving the deficit and driving the debt up. And the president's refusal to sit down and have a conversation about this is putting our nation
at risk of default. So are you saying that if he continues to refuse to negotiate, the country is going to default?
It's the path we're on. Listen, the president canceled his trip to Asia. I assumed, well, maybe he wants to have a conversation. I decided to stay here in Washington this weekend. He knows what my phone number is. All he has to do is call.
So it's October 17th, 8 p.m. The clock is ticking toward midnight. The country's scheduled to run out of money. Won't be able to pay its bills anymore. What do you do in that moment?
No family in America can spend more than what it brings in for 55 of the last 60 years. No family or business in America can survive a $700 billion budget deficit in 1 year. It is time for us to deal with our underlying spending problems. I'm willing to sit down and have a conversation with the president, but his refusal to negotiate is putting our country at risk.
So the clock is ticking on October 17th. You're not going to put that bill on the floor?
I want to deal with our underlying problem.
Yes or no? Would you put that bill on the floor?
I do not want the United States to default on its debt. But I am not going to raise the debt limit without a serious conversation about dealing with the problems that are driving the debt up.
So on your own...
It'd be irresponsible of me to do this.
It has also been reported that you're going to guarantee that we did not default. It sounds like you're not prepared to offer that guarantee. You're not prepared to promise you would actually put the bill on the floor.
I've been willing to sit down with the president and have this conversation. His refusal to negotiate is what's putting the government at risk of default.
Say you sit down with the president, what would you offer in that conversation?
Let's look at what's driving the problem. 10,000 baby boomers like me retiring every single day. 70,000 this week, 3.5 million this year. And it's not like there's money in Social Security or Medicare. The governments over the last 30 years have spent it all. And so now we're in this whipsaw effect. This is only year 3. This is going to go on for another 22 years as baby boomers retire. We know these programs are important to tens of millions of Americans. But if we don't address the underlying problems, they're not sustainable.
So you're saying you want a conversation now about changes in Social Security, changes in Medicare, changes in entitlements. Would you be willing to accept what the president has demanded for that kind of a negotiation, having new revenues as part of the discussion?
The president got $850 billion or $650 billion of new revenues on January the 1st. He got his revenues. Now it's time to talk about the spending problem.
So that's a no.
Very simple. We're not raising taxes.